2025 work session of the Coffee County Board of Education. We've had so many meetings, I'm starting to forget the dates, but this is going to be, we got two things on the agenda, three things really. We're going to talk salary and compensation as item number one, and then Wold is going to come and give us an update on East Coffee Elementary and Hickerson Elementary. And Mr. Cordell cannot be with us tonight. He had some obligations that cropped up at last minute, so I would ask Ms. Yench to say a prayer for us.
Father, thank you for this opportunity to get together and bless our schools. And we thank you, Father, for the new schools that we're looking at and the adding on to the schools, Father. We thank you for the food that you've given us tonight, and we ask that your wisdom be over us in a mighty way as we listen and hear what needs to be done for our schools. And we thank you in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
All right, so first item on the agenda, and by way of introduction, last year we gave a across-the-board 7% increase to everyone in the school system. And I think what I'm hearing from the board is that this year we're really focused on getting the teachers up to where they need to be. So we wanted to go back, and the request was to go back and look at these salary schedules and how we can make adjustments there to get to our goal of getting the teachers to where they need to be. So I guess I would ask Ms. Melson to explain the salary schedules. You got two. You have the certified salary schedule, and you have the paraprofessional salary schedule here.
What I've done is I've put together, I'm going to take, because you already have one of the documents I've printed off, and that's my fault, because Melissa printed it and I told her to. But I have made a draft copy of what a 3% raise looks like on the certified salary schedule. Thank you. These are drafts, so I wrote draft on them. They are not to be shared because they're not official until the budget's approved all the way through the county commission. So just want to make sure I say that.
And I would add that Ms. Nelson needs to leave certainly by 5.
Yes.
So
The latest.
we're going to have limited discussion because she needs to leave, so.
Okay, so so what you're looking at is a salary schedule for all certified employees. So this would be anyone that's degreed. So your teachers, your principals, your assistant principals, your guidance counselors, your central office supervisors, everyone that's certified that holds a degree is on the salary schedule, on the certified salary schedule.
Who needs paraprofessional?
Do I need one? I made it. Do we need more? So I guess so if we give a 3% raise, that's what the pay scale will look like. If we give it 3%, the next year, we will be at around $50,119, pretty much on that first line, which will get us there in the time that we need to get there. I guess I'll open the floor for general questions. I don't know what the questions are, but this is basically the pay scale that I'm working off of as of right now in the budget.
But we said if we gave a 3% across the board, it would cost about $350,000 for every 1%. That
Right.
includes classified and certified and paraprofessionals.
So for every percent that we give, it costs around $350,000, and that is for all employees, and that's benefits, that's everything. So for every 1%, it's $350,000.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Melson on the,
April, you said if we do 3% this year, and next year we'll be up to the 50,000.
So yeah, so that if you take that number, 49,000, and I don't have a copy of it, 49,000, whatever, some change, and you add 3% to it, it gets us around, I think, $50,119 or something like that. So we would be where we need to be in order to meet the state guidelines.
I have a question on this draft salary, certified salary schedule. I know that right now, a teacher with BS, no experience, coming with the first time, 40 hours experience, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so coming with a master's, they're meeting that 50,000, 56,091. Well, how will that adjust? What I'm saying is, somebody coming with a master's is actually gonna be penalized because they're already meeting that. You see what
I'm saying they're already meeting that goal, so their salary wouldn't change.
So-
Is that right?
When I add 3% to it'll add 3% to everyone, so that master's scale will also go up by 3%.
Will it be retroactive going back, starting at the 50? You see what I'm saying? Because that master's is determined on the base salary.
So if I look at the master's line, so if I look at masters and zero, so let's talk about,
Okay.
let's look at next year. And.
You understand what I'm saying? I may
kind
not
of
be
maybe,
making
but I
sense.
just want to put some numbers to it, so.
And that may not even be, it may not even be applicable,
No, it's fine.
may not even be applicable, but you will probably do well to get someone with a BS.
So if the person with, BS and zero will go to 50,119 as of July 1 of next year, not next year, but 26, 27 school year. The person with a master's and zero, so if we bring someone with a master's and zero in, let me just calculate, because I didn't pay attention to that line because they're already above. They'll be at 54,683, so they'll get the same, potentially the same increase as
Right,
the
so
person
it's
coming
gonna,
in. So every time we give a 3%, it affects every
Right.
spot on this.
so the only
Yeah.
way it wouldn't affect, so instance, how many teachers now that are not making the 50,000?
71,
I thought it was 31.
31,
Yeah.
31.
Okay,
and I
and if
think
we
they're
chose to go ahead and get them to the 50,000 this year, that would affect.
So either you would have to give like a 6% raise, or we would have to rebuild a whole salary schedule.
Well,
Because you would
why-
want to add those steps in. You wouldn't want to be at 0, 1, 2, 3, and not be at, or 0 and 1 would both be at 50,000. You would want to build those steps in.
Well, I mean, I know that we're here to look at different options on what we're gonna do, and this is not necessarily what I would be for, but that's an option that we could increase those 31 teachers to 50,000
This first year?
this first year.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't, why would that change anything on the step?
Because they would be at your number 0 and 1, and they would make the same amount
Well,
each year. I mean, until they got to year 3 or 2 on the pay scale, they would make the same amount. So if you make year 0 and 1, $50,000, because that's where we need to be, then they would not get a raise. They get a $265 raise at year 2, or year 3, sorry.
will they be getting the same raise as everybody else?
But they would still make the same amount. So if you gave a 3% raise, that number stays the same. So if like you make 50,000 on year 0 and year 1, it still makes it whatever 50,000 times. So yeah, so it'd be 5150. So like next year when we gave a raise, both of those lines would be 51,500.
But you're talking about giving it across the board, though. Right?
I don't think so. I think what she's talking about is just what Ms. Frida asked, which is if you just brought those 31 up, those 31 people are going to sit here for 3 years before they'll see any kind of increase, and even when they see the increase, it'll only be $265.
Like if you were gonna do that, you
Why
would,
What, how are you getting that? How are we getting that?
No, why would they be penalized?
what do you mean? I mean, you're saying
I mean, they're
that,
not gonna make, if you make them. Yeah.
Because in order to
Because you
do
didn't
that,
raise
you'd have
everybody
to,
else's.
if you bring them up, according to this, you have to
Yeah,
bring
but we-
everybody up to
No, we
6%.
don't. We don't have to bring everybody up at the same
No,
time.
no, that's what I'm saying, we're not talking about doing this.
If
across
you
the
don't bring
board.
everybody up,
But that's what I'm saying,
look
if
at-
you
yeah,
don't bring them up, then they're gonna be,
hold
they're
it.
basically gonna be 3 years without a raise.
Okay, my thinking is you bring them up and you just start this year and you do whatever increases that we get, everybody gets it. I mean, what I'm thinking, this is just an option, but why would we wait 2 years if we can go ahead and get them up to that salary now? And because any new teacher coming in, we're gonna give them that, aren't we?
So what I would suggest do, if that's what you want to bring year zero to 50,000, then I would redo this entire BS line, the bachelor's line, because line one should be 50,000. Line zero, year zero should be 50,000. And these are just numbers I'm throwing out just because I'm making them up. Year one should be 50,250. Year two should be 50,500. So those people are getting step raises each year. If you make 0 and 1, 50,000, those, potentially, the employees coming in at year zero will not get a step raise. They'll make the same amount for year zero and year one.
Let me ask you this, if we get a new teacher this year, what will be their salary? We're not gonna start them out because they're required to? We're not starting them out at 50,000?
We're
You
not
have-
required to until 26, 27.
Right, and that's what we did. We started this 3 years ago, Frida, when we started.
Right,
because
but just because it's then, we need, I'm thinking to
That's why the
attract, to
charge
attract good
for
teachers with
those-
BS, they're gonna go somewhere where they can get the 50,000.
For
And we're gonna
those that
end up
are-
with people that aren't as
So
qualified.
the state minimum for this year is 47,000. To be at year zero, we have to be at 47,000.
Mr. Gilly?
And so,
And I'm just throwing those things out there for consideration because, if I were a first-year teacher graduating, say, from Tennessee Tech, and I had option of going to Manchester City, Tullahoma, Coffee County, if they're starting me out at 50, that's where I'm gonna go.
yeah, and we can do that, but we would have to rebuild this whole side of the scale to make those step changes.
So that would be possible. And then that's not gonna affect anybody else.
And also, we'd have to also keep in mind that we have 535,000 that we have to give. I'm looking at Keith because I'm at that number. To give and has to be spent on certified raises. So,
Right, yeah, and that's no problem of giving the raises. My opinion is, if we've gotta do this by 26, 27, why don't we go ahead and get that over with where we can attract teachers that make, are there do you know any school systems that are already that?
I'm sure Tullahoma is. I know the last time we looked, Manchester City was not, because we were ahead of them on the pay scale as of last year in a lot of different spots. I don't know about Bedford County and Franklin, I'm not sure what theirs are, but I know that Tullahoma probably is, and I know that unless Manchester City gives more than, I don't think they are right now. I think everyone's just pushing, and the money's given, like, this year's money is meant to meet the $47,000 minimum, and then next year we'll get another allotment that says, okay, here's your amount, you have to meet the 50 this year. Yes, I would love to get to 50 this year, because that means our starting pay is above surrounding counties
Right.
most likely, but I would have to rebuild this whole side of the pay scale to add the steps in to make it, because I feel like, and this is just my opinion, that a certified teacher to come in and make 50,000 for the first 2 years and not get a raise till the third, I feel like they would look at this pay scale and be like, I'm not going there, because I'm not gonna get a raise for 3 years.
But we
Because
can-
I'm not understanding that.
I'm confused why they wouldn't.
Why wouldn't they get a raise like everybody else?
A step raise, they wouldn't get a step raise, they would get a
Why?
raise, but they would be,
Why
they
would
would-
they be excluded?
because they wouldn't have, so, do you see, so look at year 0 and 1, the difference between the two steps. So if you make both of those 50,000, there's no difference between the steps. So at year 0 and year 1, they're gonna make 50,000. For 2 years, they're gonna make just 50,000. Yes, they might get the 3% raise, but they're not gonna get the step raise that everybody else gets.
Why aren't they?
Because year 0 and year 1 would be the same amount. We would have to completely rebuild this whole side of the scale to make that step raise.
Well, I see no problem rebuilding that, but I just can't understand why you wouldn't get a step raise, why your salary would stay the same.
This chart, I'm gonna find it, this chart is exactly what we all started 3 years ago.
Well, I understand that, but I'm,
That's all she's done. All she's
Yeah,
done is come in here and
right.
presented the same chart we've been doing every year and a
Right.
half for the last 2
Right.
years. Because the first thing everyone said 3 years ago was, well, yeah, sure, we could just raise our starting pay to 50,000, but we had 10 and 15-year employees at that time. It wasn't going to move, and they were gonna be within $5,000 and $8,000 of where their
Right.
starting pay was, so we said, no,
It's too
we've
much
gotta do
difference
this
at that
across
time.
the
Yes.
board and scoot everyone till we get our basic, that. And keeps us, and that's like she said a while ago, keeps us, competitive all the way across all of these.
but the way I look at it, we're not doing this to try to make a difference between people's salary. We're gonna be required to do that. So when we get to that point, so you're saying we'll get to the 50,000 by,
If we can give a 3% this year and a 3% next year.
right,
And so they just looked at Tullahoma's pay scale, and we'll be ahead of Tullahoma. We should be ahead of Tullahoma, unless they give some kind of 6 or 7%
Even
raise.
now.
We're ahead right now.
46.2 is their year zero, and Tullahoma 24.25.
And we're 47. I don't have that.
That's not a bad thing, is it?
No, that's a
no,
great
that's
thing.
good.
You know, that's what I'm saying, yeah. So,
Well,
I
that's
mean,
good to know, because that was my thinking. If we're behind everybody, why wouldn't we just go ahead and catch up and forget it? But, understand.
Ms. Jones, another thing is, if you remember, the board voted to correct these pay scales completely. So basically, the way it's set up right now is every year, if you're an educator, you're getting paid, let's say, you know that next year you're going to get either an $802 raise
Right.
for a year's
Step
experience.
increase, yeah.
The next year, it might be 803, is within $1 there
Mm-hmm.
each year. If you jump all those at the very beginning, those first ones up to 50,000, well, you no longer have that $802 or $803 because it's 50,000, it's 50,000. Then you start doing your 802, 803. Right now, every teacher knows each year they're gonna get an increase of about $802 or $803. If you jump up to 50,000 all at once with the first two, you've done away with that $802, $803. It's just
Right.
$50,000.
Right, but that teacher would be making an extra 2,000 by,
But they
each
wouldn't
time.
be seeing that
You
they're
see what I'm
getting
saying?
a raise because they start at 50,000.
But they're getting
The
more.
next year, they're gonna make 50,000. In their mind, I'm not getting a raise, even though,
But they
They
made
did get
more the
more in
beginning,
a sense.
they got the raise in the
but
beginning.
they're not seeing that because they weren't here. All
Well,
they're
I would
seeing is
see it. If I were,
50,000.
if I were taking a
pretty sure
job,
they'll
I'd
see it.
see it.
What? Mr. Shores?
Never mind, I'm
Okay.
just trying to help.
No, that's just my
Appreciate it.
point. That's the raise at the beginning. They're getting it right there.
and are we bound?
Anyway,
to-
I'm finished.
Are we bound to what we did 3 years ago? I mean, can we not change this thing every year?
I think that you could change it, but what I'm saying is the board worked hard diligently to correct the pay scales to get a pay scale that makes sense. And it has been fixed, and the board did well on getting it corrected. And I think what Ms. Mills is trying to do is say, we don't want to blow it up and make a mess of the pay scale. Can it be changed? The board has the right to make that change and make increases, but it's done in a way that you can do 3% this year, 3% next year, and you've got your $50,000, and everybody's getting their continued raises on their
You kind of took the entire
experiences.
system up as well.
Yes.
So you've made even a teacher that comes over here that's got 15 years of experience, she's going to see a better number here in this school system than probably where she came
Correct,
from.
and we're not just looking to get new teachers, we want to get all teachers. in
And
a
also,
sense.
I think when I remember making that list, I think over half of the teachers were already gonna roll off of that list anyways, unless we have new teachers come in, but over half of that 31 was gonna roll off of that list because they were gonna go to year 2. And so next year, there may not be as many, but we may get some new teachers that are year 0, and so we're kind of back in the same boat with them.
Yeah, it may weed itself out by next year. Yeah.
To think about like this, so we're getting TISA funds to make this adjustment, to help us make this adjustment. So in the year 27, 28, if we don't get TISA funds and we can't give a raise by whatever means something happens, year 0 and 1 would be the same amount forever, like if we never were able to give a raise again.
it's
Does
like-
that make sense?
Yeah, and it was like you were saying a while ago, you're looking at, if we done everything all the way across the board, you're looking at 350,000 per
Times-
percent.
Times, so if we give a 3% raise, it'll be 350 times 3.
But that
So
includes
a million
classified.
fifty, but
That
then
includes,
you,
that includes everybody.
$1.05 million, but then the state is allocating 533,000 back to help that.
Right.
So even if we did the 3% for everyone this year, we're just looking at
And
a
see, I'll even have
smaller
to
hit.
calculate, that 3%, that 535,000 before we even bring a budget, or a budget gets presented to make sure we're gonna meet that TISA guideline, because that's the one thing we have to meet.
And that would actually be, if I'm not mistaken, if we have a hit to our fund balance of 530 or 600, whatever the difference is to make up for it, that's the smallest hit we've had in 3 years to do these raises all the way across the board. That'd be the smallest hit. And then if we've got the possibility of next year weeding that out to where we really don't even, might not even have to.
And
do
remember,
it.
we always try to give worst case scenario when I bring those, like, we were very conservative on revenue, and then, to the extreme on some expenditures, so we give you worst case scenario that we think if the worst thing happens, this is what's gonna hit fund balance, so.
So I think we're looking as a group at two different ways. One, carry on like we are with the 3%, or rebuild the DS column, is that way, the way I'm?
Yeah, I think
and
that's,
just set a base pay at 50,000. Right?
The only thing I
Now-
was going to tell you is real quickly that about the restricted fund in TISA, that is codified into law with Tennessee Code annotated with the TISA law itself, that the state sets aside $125 million across the entire state for the teacher raises. And the way that Coffee County's or any districts is calculated, and the easy number is the state ADM averages around 1 million. Coffee County's portion of that right now of the state ADM is 0.43%. So they simply multiply let's just say they simply multiply the 125 million by about 0.43%. That's where right now the 536,000 is coming from. So, and that, I just wanted to let you know, that's codified into law, so that it would take legislation to change that, and I don't foresee them changing that. I'm not getting any chatter on that right now. That's all I was gonna say to you.
so we gave a 3% to classified only. Would that total up to 536?
Well, we can't use
I
certified
mean,
funds.
certified, I'm sorry, certified, I misspoke, so,
So that's something I'm gonna I could
okay.
have to calculate.
So this schedule would meet our obligations for dispersing the TISA funds?
I haven't made it all the way through that calculation
Okay.
yet, so I'm still working through payroll budget right now.
Okay,
So when, I'm almost finished with it, so I should this week, early next, know if that 3% will meet the 535,000.
but just to clarify, that is for certified employees only.
That's
and
correct.
Does not include the paraprofessionals, does not
It does not.
include the classified, okay.
And I think we'll get there with the step raises because step raises count and percentage raises count. So I think we'll get there. I just want to be sure before I say we're gonna get there, and then we don't get there and have to come back to you guys and say, well, we have to do a 4% because 3% won't get us there.
Right, well,
So-
and it would be
and that's
great if
kinda
we
why
could do
I'm-
4%, yeah.
That's
so,
kind of why I'm building the 3% first, to
Right.
see if we can get there with it. And if we can't, then I may have to say, we
Okay.
might have to look at a 4 because that's what will get us to the 535,000.
all right.
So what you're saying is you are coming up with a percentage for everybody having the same raise to get the first-year teacher up to 50. And
That's
if
correct.
3% won't do it, we have to go up on 4%.
That's
We
correct.
couldn't just do theirs.
That's correct, because everyone
We
all
could.
certified employees are attached to this scale. All certified people are attached to this scale. So when you raise this scale, it raises all those other groups
Right.
too.
And that was my point. If we should get in a bind in 2 years, we're gonna be required still, to get those salaries up to 50, whether we can afford to do a 7% or whatever for everybody, we're still gonna be required.
So
to
say
get-
we can give a 3% this year and it gets us to that 536,000 or whatever number. Next year we get 500 and something thousand, the same amount, but we maybe can't give the 3%. We could look at a flat across the board raise, so like the difference between the 50,000 and the 48,660, and then everyone would get that. And then I would have to calculate to see if that would meet our number that we would get from TISA next year. So there's a
it
couple
would-
different
you
options.
have to do away with this and do just the flat
I would
amount.
just add whatever $1,200 to this top line and add it all the way through the pay scale on every line.
But understand, either one of those will prevent messing up the pay scale that has been prepared in the past by the board. So both of those methods keeps the pay scale from being destroyed. Correct?
That's right.
Right, it's whether you do a dollar amount or whether you do a
percentage amount.
percentage, but proportionally, there should be a raise at each step.
Right.
And
You could choose to, I mean, we could do, instead of doing this, we could do the flat amount this year. We could do, I mean, there's options, so I would lean towards the 3% because that's what's gonna get it's gonna raise your scale more, I guess, than just doing the flat amount.
And I think what's important here is that the clock is ticking on the budget, so April needs
It's-
some guidance from the board on which way we want to go on this.
It's,
And so that-
Could you break out the certified scale between the teachers and administration? I mean,
so,
basically, it would be the same scale, but break the two groups apart so that when we start looking at raises,
I would have to
Yeah.
have a whole different pay scale the board would have to tell me who they want on that pay scale, and I would have to have a completely new pay scale to move those people to. Because what happens is, when this pay scale gets approved, basically, essentially, as soon as the commission approves my budget, I build this pay scale. That's why I was hesitant to hand it out, because I don't usually build this until the commission approves their budget, and which is in July, usually, well, end of June, 1st of July. And I take this pay scale and I load the pay scale in our salary or payroll system. And it basically, everyone attached to this pay scale, now their base pay is this amount.
right, but
So-
what I'm saying though is you keep this same scale because as it is now, you know, if they have a title, they get additional money. So, I mean, their pay scale's the same. What I'm saying is for raise purposes, just say we get in a bind and, you know, we gotta raise the teachers up. But if there's not, you know, if it's 3% for the teachers that we need, but maybe we can only afford to go 2% on others, I mean, it would still work off the same pay scale because the base pay scale.
So we would go back to what we had 3 years ago, and we would have to build a whole new pay scale and move all admin to that pay scale. So we did away with that because it's a payroll nightmare. Like, and I'm not trying to, that's kind of why we went away from it. Because you have three actually you have three, this one, that one, and then all of these classified pay scales that we have to attach people to.
At that time, we had 17, I believe. Am I
I think
wrong?
that's the work calendars.
Yeah.
So
Between
it could be
all
done.
that.
It has been done in the past, but it would have to be done. And I want to say this, and nobody, please don't attack me. But at this point in the year, it would be extremely difficult for that to happen because I'm looking at getting a budget to you guys in 2 weeks.
Are you saying the commission can't wait? We can't amend it or anything?
So we have to have a approved budget presented to Budget and Finance by May 1st. We have a meeting to meet with them on April 28th. I have to have them the budget to review by April 21st. We have our meeting with you guys on April the 10th, and then a board meeting to vote on the budget on April the 15th.
And that's
So there's-
dictated in law,
I mean,
those dates.
I'm basically, payroll budget is 85% of my budget.
Mr. Hansard,
we just came from a TSBA meeting, and there's schools all over this state that don't get their budget turned in till 2 or 3 months, you know.
It's
I
state
don't
law,
know
it's in
why.
board
I'll be
policy.
glad to loan you the law books and you can read it.
We-
It's in board policy. It says May 1st, and it's state law.
Run.
You're welcome to them. I think I emailed everybody.
I mean, I
Even
can,
with an
You can read.
amendment, like if we weren't ready,
I'd have to call the commission and tell them.
I think that's what
It
they
might
were,
be
Because they
worth-
also have to roll our budget in with theirs and present it as a whole. We have to go present our budget to them, and then they have to roll our budget into their budget and present it as a whole to the full commission. So there's a lot of things that happen, so I have to also go to the commission and present our budget early June. So there's a lot of things that have to happen, and we're under the gun, like,
my only thought on that is that we as a board, if we're just not ready, if we're just not, you know, if we're undecided, if we're just not ready to move forward with one pay scale or however it shakes out, you know, would we have the option to amend and just explain, we're not ready, we'll get it, you know,
I would have
next
to-
month, or I don't know, and
I
I'm just
think-
asking if that's
I
possible.
think we would have, we've never had that happen. So what I think would happen is, I think we would have, the commission or the budget finance would have to file something with the state to let them know that we did not meet our deadline, and it may put also the county under the gun of not meeting their deadline.
Okay.
So
That's maybe something we just want to research.
I'm
and
not,
find out.
I'm not pressuring you guys by any
Yeah.
means. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to follow my,
Yeah, I'm
the
just
guidelines
saying,
that I'm given by the county to
yeah,
to
that,
have an approved budget.
you know, if it puts a lot of pressure on us, you know, I don't want us to rush it if we have the option to get an extension or amendment or whatever.
I don't
Because
think
it would
you
be
can. I
better
think you
to,
have
hang on,
to.
Robert, it would be better to
Holly,
make
you
an
have to.
informed decision, and be confident and comfortable with that decision than to rush something, is all I'm saying.
Mr. Gilly?
You have to. That's all I'm gonna say. You have to pass a budget. Yes, you can amend a budget after the fact, but it'll still have to go through budget and finance of the county. It'll still have to be amended. If it's a major amendment, I do believe that time the county will have to readdress if the state will allow to do it. Because
That's
it
something
has
we
to
can
be
check into.
submitted. It has to be submitted to the Commissioner of Education. And I think that's not long after the county gets permission to approve it, I believe. I believe it's by August some date. It has to be.
There's all kinds of tests the county have to meet, maintenance of effort and all of that, and all of those have to be completely done before we get to July 1 to make sure, like, they don't need to come back and give us more funding, or, I mean, there's lots of things that happen from now to June 30.
Okay. So I understand this, the draft that you gave us, this will work. We'll get to that 50,000 requirement in 2026,
So in,
27?
in the next school year, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Not this next one, but the next one.
Okay. Now, is this a 3%?
This would be 3%. I didn't put it
Okay.
on there because I didn't want to
Okay.
put too much on
And
there.
it was confusing me because this was last year's, the 7%.
And then I have that one for this year, if y'all want me to pass them around. Did we give everybody one of these? I may need more copies. That's the classified pay scales.
Let me mention that there may be changes that we want to make in the future, but it may be too late this year. So that those changes may be something that we look forward to next year and we start working on it a lot earlier.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I
it's
think-
really not
yeah.
fair to April at this point
Yeah.
to say you've got to change all this
I
stuff.
agree. I agree that we should probably start earlier, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll do whatever you guys, it's just, at this point in the game, it's gonna be incredibly difficult to,
We like you. We don't want to kill you, okay?
Does she have to have would that have to be a motion in a meeting?
it has to be a whole new pay scale, and it has to be approved, and then I can move it into our payroll system, and then I can start putting people, whoever the board chooses to put on that pay scale.
So between the pending view or difference of views, those would be options that the very next board meeting, we would be approving which way for her to go, right?
Well, the next board meeting, needs to be, we're gonna talk about the budget. We're gonna be presented the budget at the work session on the 10th, and then the 15th is the board meeting. We need to approve the budget, so.
And she needs
Based
to
on
know,
that
so-
timescale.
But it's gonna
And
take a
so-
vote, though. It'll take a vote to change the pay scale. So we may have to have a special called meeting just,
I don't think anybody's wanting to change the pay scale at this point, you know.
well, I mean, y'all got legitimate concerns. I'm not gonna say that. But I think to change anything other than the plan of the 3% like we've been going is gonna take a vote, I do believe, to ever change the direction of that. Am I wrong?
Well, I think each year we vote on whether it's a 3% raise, a 5%, you know, that's not gonna.
Usually there's 2 to 3 options
Right,
given.
that's not a, you
Well,
know,
I think what she
stated
was talking
thing.
about was if she needs to redo some things and just redraw the pay scale and,
Well, that would be if we changed everything to 50,000, which
Well, I think
we're
that
not.
the question was,
yeah,
that
if
there
that's
was,
the way y'all would rather pursue this, I think.
I think the question was about moving maybe some admin to a different pay scale.
So is this possible? Because I know you have to leave early, and I do too. To do, and I don't even know if the board would want to do this, okay? This is just throwing that out there. You know, it's obviously, you know, a change, and it may or may not be wanted, but would it be possible to do, like, say, 3 pay scales and have one for certified teachers, one for non-certified employees, and then one for admin?
So you already have this one, so the only thing that would be required is you'd have to build a new pay scale for admin.
Yeah.
Everything else, so if you look at your professional salary schedule, that has all the classified employees on it. You don't have a copy?
No, we didn't have enough.
And that would require board approval, is to, if you built a separate salary schedule, you'd have to have board approval for that.
Maybe. So this is kind of this paraprofessional is what we call our classified or hourly employees. And this is basically category by almost position, but there's a few groups that are grouped together. So these are where our hourly, these are the pay scales our hourly people are on. So if you look across there, you can see the different categories. And you can see there, this is with the 3% raise next year, just kind of like we did for same as this scale.
Well, I think, you know, that maybe the idea of having the 3 different scales was if we wanted to pursue maybe trying to close that gap between somewhat, obviously in very small increments, between the certified and the paraprofessional. To try and maybe bring those folks up a little bit more and help close that gap. I think maybe that's what Warren County's been working on, from what I understand, which is why they went to dollar amount raises. Because that does kind of help close the gap instead of everybody going all up, you know, one flat dollar amount, which I'm not necessarily opposed to that either. I don't know if that's a nightmare for you. But I think that was kind of the idea, is that, you know, we've got our admin that's doing very well, and then, but our paraprofessional, our non-certified are on the low side. I think some of us feel, and we're just, you know, maybe trying to close that and feel like things were maybe a little more fair in that regard. But if that's not something the board wants to do, you know, it's.
And I know that we've done a lot of work with the pay scale in front of you. I wish I had a copy of where we started, like maybe 3 years ago. We've done a whole lot of work
Yeah.
and really, really raised the pay.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's been done in the past where we've given a 3% to one group and given a 5% to the other. That is definitely possible because these people are on different pay scales than these people. So if you look at each line on the budget, on the pay scale, those are different pay scales. And so anyone who has a custodian job is loaded in our payroll system as a custodian. So whatever that year they're on, that's their hourly rate. So that automatically gets put into payroll when this pay scale is generated. So potentially, if you wanted to give more of a raise to your classified staff, you could do it in that way. Give them a different percentage,
Yeah.
you give them a flat amount, you could pretty much do what you want over here.
Right.
The problem with this one is you have so many people attached to it that once you raise it, you have to give it to everyone because everyone's attached to this one. Where these people are attached to the different categories on there.
So, on this one, does this include admin, is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but we could break it out into three, right? If we
You could, the board would have to approve
Okay,
a new pay scale and then tell me who they would want on to go to that pay scale.
okay.
How long will it take to do that?
I have no idea what you guys would even want, because we just,
To separate that out?
Basically, if you just took that same pay scale and you just had two of them, you had one for the teachers and one for admin. I mean, using those same base numbers.
That's fine,
It'd just be the fact of moving names from one pay scale to another pay scale.
that would have to be approved by the board.
Right, but I'm
Okay.
just
In the
saying,
board
you
meeting.
know,
If that's what we wanna do.
how much work, would you have in it?
I've already built the payroll budget. It's pretty much
Right.
almost done for this school year. Would have to go back and change all those people,
Right.
and then we would have to
How
figure out,
how long would it, that's what I'm saying, how long would it take you to do that?
I don't know. I don't know how many people you're talking about.
We'd
Because
have to
you think about
define
this
who is
too,
on
it's like, if you're
what-
talking about,
What salary schedule, so your teachers and aides are, which schedule are they on, as opposed to admin, as opposed to principals? So you'd have to define
Supervisors.
I think,
supervisors, yeah, so you'd have to define that for who you want on what pay scale. And that's kind of, I think, what April's asking here, right? So, yeah.
I think, are you talking about administrators like principals, supervisors? So that,
Exactly.
I think that's what they're talking about.
Yeah,
Principal,
administrators.
supervisors, and the supplements that, because it's, teachers don't get that. So this doesn't reflect to the
and a lot
board.
of the extra, I think they'll have the salaries, and I think that's
Yeah.
the concern, because, but a lot of the salary is extra days, because we're here
Right.
all summer
Yeah.
long working. And the teachers, this is the teacher pay scale, is a 200-day scale.
Yeah, and so that's the one that we have, is a 200 pay scale.
Right. And I don't build a 257, so basically I take this pay scale and use it to extrapolate, like if someone's 221, I use it, get their daily rate based on what year they're on, and then I multiply that
That's
times
the
their.
base.
Yeah, I've done the calculation on that.
A couple of things to think about when you're looking at the admin and the supervisor's pay scale. They get supplement, but you gotta realize they're getting paid for extra days that they work.
Right.
They get paid for extra degrees, because usually your principals and your supervisors gonna have your higher degrees, multiple degrees, and that's gonna push them on up on the pay scale as well. Usually your principals and your supervisors are gonna be your high end on experience. You usually don't put a first-year teacher as a supervisor. It doesn't happen. So usually they're already maxed out in their 25 years or more a lot of times. So you're already pushed up. So when you're looking at these supervisors and administrators, yes, they're going to be making the more money because they put in extra days, they have the degrees, they have the experience, and they also have the more responsibilities. The things fall on their backs. They are a 24/7 employee. Anytime something happens at a school, the principal's called. They're on call for it. Supervisor's on call each and every day. So they are going to be your higher paid, and rightfully, I would think, should be your higher paid because of all those different things they do. And the biggest one is they work more days. Teachers get, mainly 200-day contract, supervisors at 257 days. That's another 57 days that they're working. That's going to push their pay up. So I'm not sure what you're looking at, but if you're just looking at the total salary, it's going to look way up here, but you also got to realize they are putting in a lot more days as well, and to get that extra up there. So just keep those things in mind when you're talking about your admin and your supervisors as well, okay?
I certainly understand where their salaries come from, because I was up
You-
here
you were one,
myself. And,
right.
you know, you're basically just working extra days, but, and maybe a supplement on top of that, so. But I think what y'all were asking is something, I mean, I may be wrong, that you're wanting a separate one where you can see that it's basically this, and then there's a supplement for instructional supervisor, what that is. Where I think that's what it is. They would like to see what each supervisor gets tacked on to their base salary.
I think
Is
they
that
have
what you're
that,
saying?
Ms.
I don't
No,
Jones.
no,
I
no,
believe
what-
they, some
what
of
I'm
them have,
saying
some of the board
is-
has that. I don't know who all does, but
yeah.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got
out
it.
there
We've got
somewhere.
that.
I've got it.
No, what I'm saying is, you know, you got a supervisor, and we'll just use good round numbers here. You got somebody making $100,000. Okay, you got a teacher making $50,000. All right, well, you give a 3% raise, that teacher's gonna get a $1,500 a year raise. That supervisor is getting a $3,000 a year raise. So, you know, percentages really don't work real good if you wanting to try to contain
Reduce
your.
the gap down.
Well, and not necessarily reducing the gap as much as keeping, keeping everybody on kind of the same level. Because you start compounding, you know, every time you go up. So, you know, this year you got a 3%, next year you give a 3%, well, all of a sudden, you know, this person here's over 2 years received $6,000. This person here's only received, you know, half that. And I mean, that's what I'm getting at, to be able to control, you know, because I mean, if we run into a situation where money's tight, then you got a situation where, well, if we give a 3%, we got to give, you know, those higher salaries, those percentages add a lot of dollars to the bottom line, is what I'm getting at, to be able to control that if we need to.
I'm gonna throw just the, you know, cost of living, they don't go by, somebody that's, doing this job compared to this job on where they are. It's a cost of living percentage for everybody. It's the same thing on the area. If you are building and I'm looking at Wold, if you're building a school for an elementary school, and then you're also building a high school, if the cost of the price of increase for materials is 3%, just because it's a smaller school doesn't change that it's 3%. It's still gonna be 3% that's gonna go up either way. At the elementary school, it might be another $100,000, but the high school, it might be another $400,000 because the 3%. So it doesn't make any difference. You're still looking at the same thing with it. Now, as far as with your pay scales, to keep from messing those up, if you don't want to do a percentage, you can stay away from the percentage and do a flat amount and not destroy your pay scale still. And it does cost less money to do a flat amount. Is that correct, Ms.
Maybe.
Melson? Maybe.
It just depends on what percentage you look at. Like, you know, 3% may be less than, maybe less, 2,800 may be less than a 3%. I've never calculated it that way because we've never given a raise like that. So I don't know what that would cost.
But I agree with you, Chris. If you are really pushed for the funding, then you could go to that flat rate with it. But admin and your supervisors are making the extra money off of the stipend that they make on top of it for the position that they're in, or they're getting the same money because they're just working more days, or they have more degrees, or they have more experience, which is the same thing as any teacher that would be getting it as well. If they get called to come in during the summer for the whole summer, they're gonna get the same thing that they got based on the base pay. It's just more days. You see what I'm saying?
Hold on just a minute. Ms. Melson has to leave,
Well,
so.
I wanted to say one more thing. You know, you guys talk about being competitive and compete, like having salaries with Tullahoma, Manchester, whoever. Back when we looked at all of this, I think it was a couple of years ago, Dr. Lawson went out and did all the research on what other supervisors make. What brought light to this was Miss Brenda Brown retired, and we had interviewed several people for that position. We offered it to someone in Tullahoma, And she looked at our pay scale and he calculated, and she said, there's no way I'm coming for that. Like, I'm not gonna I'm not leaving taking $30,000 pay cut to come from Tullahoma to work over here and work more days, pretty much. And so that's when it opened our eyes to look at our pay scales for supervisors. And he went around and he gathered all the information, and he talked to Franklin County, Bedford County, maybe Warren, Tullahoma, which was way out of our reach, because if you look at anybody Tullahoma, I mean, I know the finance director sitting over there, just because I know, because he was posted 2 years ago. He makes 30 more thousand a year than I do, which, I mean, I have more schools, I have more, and I'm not advocating for me, I have more schools, I have more students, I have more responsibility. He also has the same number of staff. So I'm just saying, like, I think all of that was done to try to stay competitive with these roles, as well as our teachers and our principals and our classified staff. So we've kind of done the work to try to get there. And I mean, I just want guys to keep that in mind, because I know I hit year 25 on the pay scale. And so say you broke this apart and you chose not to give a raise to supervisors, admin for 3 years. And that probably would never happen. But I would sit here on the pay scale, and for 3 years, I would sit here and work the same number of hours and never get a cost of living increase. So also keep that in mind, that you have your highest paid people are in this office because they have the most experience, and they're most likely on this bottom of this pay scale. So I just want y'all to keep all of that in mind. I'm not speaking for me, I'm speaking for everyone. I want everyone in this county to get a raise, because I know how hard everyone works to make things happen for our kids.
It's
So-
no different than the discussion you had as a board the other night for the director of schools. You didn't keep it at what it was because you wanted to attract somebody to come in, and you end up increasing it from what it was. You had to, because you saw what the other cost and everybody else is getting paid, so you had to increase it. You want to be able to bring people in. We don't want to lose a position of a assistant principal or a principal, and nobody wants it because it's just not worth the money. We've got to be competitive,
I
and
don't think
people want
anybody in
it.
here is trying to keep.
No,
anybody
I'm
from
just
getting a
saying, but
raise.
those are
I
the things
don't
you gotta
want
keep in
anybody out
mind.
there in la land thinking that that's the, that what you're saying is true of the board.
Okay.
It's not.
Our admin salaries are, I mean, they're doing really well, even
Here's
compared to other
here's a
districts.
scenario, I've stood here and figured this up. Let's just say,
Scott, hold up just a minute. Ms.
I
Nelson has
can
to leave.
save maybe 5 more minutes,
What I might suggest
because I want to
is
help answer any questions I
we
can.
have a salary and compensation
yeah,
committee slot for next week that we can, if you guys want to keep that, we can move the discussion there and look at, if you want to break this out and how you'd want to break it out. That, just a suggestion, since Ms. Melson has to leave, she couldn't be there for the meeting next week, but, you can certainly decide what to do on that. So is that,
You're talking about the salary compensation committee meeting
Yeah.
next week?
yeah,
I mean, I'm good with that.
yeah, I'm good with it.
yeah, I think, why don't we do that then?
I just have one question. So all we're actually doing is giving a cost of living increase. Is that right? Those 3%?
Maybe a little more, I don't know, what is cost of
What
living?
is cost
I
of living
feel like
increase?
it was 4. I feel like they said it was 4 this year.
Really?
Probably was.
I think what I'm hearing, and I don't want to get in this discussion because I may have a conflict of interest in the situation, as most of you may know. But what I'm hearing is it's not impossible for April to make out another pay scale. But it's at this point in time, it's almost improbable because of time restraints, I think. If you want to give her direction, she'll work till midnight like she does a lot of times getting this stuff together. But if it's not that drastic right now, you can advise her, and this time before next year we'll start this. You go ahead and start working on another pay scale for supervisors, and then you'll have those when budget time comes for next school year, or for the 27-28 school year, I guess. You follow what it's not impossible to make out a new pay scale. At this point in time, it's just time crunch to get it done.
And it might be even favorable to the supervisors, because I know from experience that it was based on a teacher's salary. You know, it was based on teacher's salary, not on what a base supervisor would be
Yes.
making. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
Anyway, that's just something to think about.
Can I ask a question? He told me about my time, but I'll let that.
Sure.
I'm the low man on the totem pole when it comes to admin, like I'm AP, right? So. I don't wanna go to the mic.
Well, if you want to speak.
Okay.
Yeah. We just don't want to keep
That's
April
all right.
because she
I
needs
just-
to leave.
I
Yeah.
just want to know, because my perception is, I feel like right now, and I think some of the other people that we've been talking about, is that if we split this up, then we don't deserve a raise. Now, again, I'm the lowest person on the admin totem pole. But my question would be is, personally, I don't feel like I make like a substantial amount. I'm year 12 or year 11 I get an 8% stipend, right? So based on a teacher's salary. So if we split that up, I can't even imagine how that looks if we're not going off a teacher's salary. I work 11 more days than regular teachers do, but I work more. I'm not saying I work harder. I feel like I do, but I'm not saying I work harder. But I think for simplicity, it's just easier to look at that scale, go, okay, I'm going to make 8% more than what those teachers are making because I work. My duties require more. So when you say administration and break that up, could you clarify what you mean? Because sometimes it sounds like y'all are talking about just central office staff. Sometimes it sounds like y'all are talking about building or principals as well. So I think that clarification would also be helpful for some of the questions that we've been having in the schools.
And that might be a question that's answered at the Salary and Compensation Committee next week. So
So just a thought on
Is-
that.
how do you break that out?
Because
Yeah.
right now, I mean, there are still teachers in our building that makes more money than we do. So,
Seen that.
yeah. So it's
And-
just
and
one of
that's-
those things.
That's something that we've looked at, because I think principals, assistant principals.
I
it
thought
was-
we had
It was
that,
very enlightening to see.
I thought we had that compensation stabilization to,
We do.
Okay.
We do, but that only counts for, principals.
so assistant principals aren't
And-
included in that?
No,
Okay, just building principals?
building principals, and then, anybody like, if someone up here was to supervise people,
Right,
that they would have to make more than their
okay,
$500 more than
okay, yeah,
what person.
but that's just principals.
And the job we do, we obviously don't do it for our pay, but we want to advocate for it because groceries are high, y'all. So,
Especially eggs.
especially
All right. Thank you,
Okay, you're
Ms.
welcome.
Nelson. And,
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
See y'all next time.
So we definitely want to call the salary and compensation for next.
I think so. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. So let's do that because we got some good, it was a good discussion. I think we got some good information. So
You know, I'm just going to make this comment, Tom. We spent, an hour trying to figure out a salary on our new director because we wanted the best. Well, we've got to consider we want the best in our principals, our assistant principals, those who are up in the front office. We also want the best in them. And I don't want another school system stealing our best. So that's just something to think about with the salary.
thank you. All right. The Wold folks, you guys, you guys always get to sit through these interesting discussions, right?
Thank you. We're a little bit.
Okay, well, then we need to go ahead and get that set up.
You're not gonna be talking? I'll tell you what, I did it this way right here. How's this? That you need it, we can share it.
Calvin, how you doing?
You've been talking.
I hate for everybody watching.
Here.
Are you gonna be speaking too? Yeah. Okay, I need to get you a lapel mic. I assume you have an HDMI. Got a couple, 3
3 extra copies of the planning presentation that Vaughn presented last time, if y'all wanna,
Is that what we have?
probably so.
Still like that?
Yep, that's the one. Big widescreen.
Anybody want pie or cookie? Sweet and everything else?
These two old men might, these two old men might want some pecan pie.
I tell you, I've been doing this for a long time, and school board members, you have a rough way to go. You have a lot of responsibility, and nobody really appreciates it.
I got, oh, we still, is Mike still hot?
Test.
I think they are. I got my opinions on it, my choices in life. I'm telling you.
Yeah, see, they're, the mic's just. Yeah, from the pocket.
That's right.
We're ready, I mean, we're still. Mike's still hot, folks. So do I need to turn that off? I mean, nobody told me to turn it
Too
off.
late, Mr. Damewood. It's too late.
No, I can't say enough good things about this Coffee County School.
These architects are really fantastic.
We'd like to go ahead and thank everybody for letting us be
All
here
right,
tonight.
we are live, so
We'd like to thank everybody for letting us be here tonight and letting us work on your projects. We had an interesting meeting at the high school, last Friday or Friday before last?
Friday before last.
Yeah. That's gonna be a challenge, but I think we worked it out.
Okay. Well, I think that last time you presented to us at the board, there were some questions as to growth and the capacity at the various schools, and you were going to look at that and come in, give us a little more detailed presentation here on that, so.
That's correct.
And then whatever, we have a few board members that are more construction-oriented than I am, so we'll let them kind of take the lead on that, so fire away.
Well, we have Vaughn Dirks and Jacob Cherry and myself, Steve Griffin. So we'll turn it over to Vaughn because he's kind of been the champion of this whole effort, the planning effort, so.
I think what we talked about last time
I think
is.
that- Sorry.
You're good. At Rockstar.
We don't do enrollment projections because we think it's really important that enrollment projections are done third party.
Can you guys share the mic?
He's got
or-
one.
Oh, you got a mic? Okay, got it, all right.
So we don't have growth information because that's not something that we project. That would be something that we respond to in terms of what the growth is. We do have some companies that are national that do enrollment projections, but I'm sure that there's other ways that you've done growth projections before. Usually with the cohort survival method is what a lot of districts use to show that growth. What that wouldn't account for would be anything that's a new change in the area. If you've got a major housing development going up, for example, that you anticipate different
Well,
things
we do have a local real estate expert, so.
But we do have the presentation from before, and what we didn't have last time was a lot of opportunity for you to ask more in-depth questions, to do other things, to be able to help with how you want to make that decision for what you want to do at the two buildings. And so that's our understanding, that's today, is that that's the time to talk about those things in more detail.
All right. So specific questions that we had from last time?
Can we bring the principals and vice principals up and let them talk?
They,
I feel like
They
they
can-
know more.
they can chime in
ask
if
than
they
we.
want. So if the principals have any questions,
Ms. Crabtree can share my night.
yeah.
Come, Timothy, come sit.
I,
Be the first
got a lot of
principal that didn't
questions.
have a lot of questions.
They
can
put the
sit.
mic on me so I can go up here and pull up anything from before to
do,
be able to
um,
talk about it.
Yeah, we have an extra microphone too, so for,
There's- I've got two over here.
yeah, so if we have a principal who wants to grab the microphone, so,
I'm just handing it
oh,
to Kathy.
we have two extra
I was
microphones.
gonna make her come up here and make her sit.
Yeah, you can,
Oh,
There's a camera.
You was on the camera a while ago. You look-
yeah, that's,
Eric, you come up here and sit and have a
yeah, where you want? Y'all just all come up here. We've got plenty of
Totally
mics.
messing up Mr. Deanwood.
Well, they told me we have to be on camera now.
Look, you sit right here. I'll go there next to Jennifer.
By the esteemed East Coffee Alliance.
That's exactly right.
Here, I'm gonna sit next to you.
here, I'll slide down. You can get right, you can slide right in there.
We're always talking about this.
All right.
He lives in the district. Yeah. He lives in the district. He lives in the district.
No, that's a good point. Input from the principals is important because these are their schools. And
That a girl
we
did.
want to take that into account. All right. So I would say run through the presentation again and we'll be able, we got the time and the format to ask, be a little more informal about asking questions.
Sure. So I'll just kind of give you the high-level overview as opposed to going into detail so we can jump into the questions. We talked a little bit about the pyramid and what we study. You start with physical conditions and capacity because those are the most objective things. What needs to be fixed and can it hold the kids? Everything above and beyond that really gets into subjective. Safety and security being next in the pyramid, then up to curriculum, activities and community use above and beyond that. We study a lot of different data and information as we're looking at this to try and determine what do you actually want to do or need to do in the buildings, both on the objective and subjective side. Talked a little bit about the RFP scope in terms of this is what it said you were looking to do. So we're basically studying, is it an addition, does an addition work, determining what that scope would be, and you also asked us to consider what the cost of new construction would be if that was deemed necessary, and develop budgets. So from a physical condition standpoint, just a big overview, we looked at the fact that there's probably about $3 million in terms of maintenance needs that have to happen in the building. Now, you can obviously prioritize a lot of this as you go forward and say, do we have to do everything in 1 year? Can we spread that over time? The study shows that you can do that. Then we take a look at the capacity of the building and how it's being utilized today to understand really what the building layout is. Target capacity at 2 section would be somewhere in that 275 to 280 student range. This one for K-5 as it's currently being used is about 260. To get to full 3 section would be up at a little bit over 400. And you've got potential in the building without an addition to be at 300. So we know that to accommodate a full 3-section model building, it would need an addition of some type at East Coffee. Same concept at Hickerson in terms of how it's being utilized today. Now, it's important to note that capacity can change from year to year depending on which spaces you're using for what. For example, if you have a higher special education population and you need to take another room for that, that's going to lower the capacity of the classroom parts of the building. Pretty straightforward, just math problem. In terms of your enrollment from 2024-25 compared to the other buildings in the district, we know that the 2-section capacity model accommodates the current enrollment, but to get to that district equity for a 3-section model, it would need additions to do that. Currently, there's no addition capacity that's needed at the building today, but that does not talk about what's going to happen in the future, and that's really where we need enrollment projections to be able to say, when you hit this population, you are going to need to do something at the building. We looked at a space analysis just in terms of room size compared to what we would see as guidelines, as well as what new construction might be, to note where some of the issues are in the building. And in the RFP, as you're addressing things like gym space, cafeteria space, that addresses some of it, but it doesn't address all of the needs of the building. And so we noted some highlights there for analysis. We also put together a draft program for what a new school would be, so that when we get into the comparison cost, running it at a true 3-section model, similar to what the other buildings are, we'd know what size we would need to do. And this is just a draft because this doesn't have a lot of input in terms of how large specifically or small specifically do you want any of these spaces. This would just be sort of a starting point for what new construction would be. We ran a security analysis that looked at a number of different facets in terms of, are there things that we would recommend for the building? And we didn't put that in there, obviously, to keep it private as opposed to public. And then we started looking at some site analysis for the buildings in terms of where could we put additions if we had to put additions onto the building? Where could we accommodate new construction? Found the East Coffee site's a little bit more workable than the Hickerson site. Hickerson site's got a few more challenges, both in terms of access points, where the current building is located, et cetera, from a traffic standpoint. Then we got into, how would we do a new building just from a diagrammatic standpoint, and just ran through, if we were laying it out, how might some of these spaces work so that we could take a look at, in a new concept, how would you make that work for your existing buildings? And could you accommodate that? And came up with, for East Coffee, there's some ways that we would look at for expanding that building that would really make improvements to get it to like new construction in terms of layout. Also to determine where additions would best be suited on the site, both for the current as well as for the future. And looking at that and making sure that we're not boxing you into a corner with any of these things that we would do. And again, these are diagrams. These are not intended to be, this is the design, this is the floor plan. This is so that we can start to say, does it fit on the site, and what budget would we apply to it if that was what we were going to do? Because that is what's going to be needed to help you make decisions. Looked at how we would expand parking and traffic drives on the site, as well as separating bus and parent traffic. Did the same thing for Hickerson in terms of looking at that. And again, I know I'm going really fast to this because this is just a quick recap to get us into the question part. Simple revision of existing drives at Hickerson's possible. There's a little bit variation on that in terms of how we look at buses, but to really get to that separate bus parking, we know that we'd have to take a look at doing some modifications down to the south side of the site to get that on there. In terms of looking at the additions, we are going to be into that playground area regardless, I think, with anything that we're doing, whether it's drive or addition onto the building. And we've got the property line to the south that really is, that's a complication, as well as the fact that the site drops off pretty significantly to that side. The addition that you currently have on there that was done in the 90s, that's setting up a ways off of the site already. So anything you went out further to the south, it's going to be almost a full story up compared to where the main entry is. Space analysis, if you did these types of additions, it does address and correct the size for some of those undersized rooms within the building, so we think that's a viable option. And from an addition standpoint, again, not knowing which of these things you would want to do or how you want to approach it, we just put together sort of almost an a la carte menu and said, here's the budgets that we would put in place for each one of these, if you did the full extent of that, compared to what new construction costs would be. And we always use a rule of thumb of, if an addition and renovation on the building is going to exceed 60% of what new construction would be, that's a good time to start saying, does this really make sense for us to do this, or should we be considering new construction? Right now you're at 50, which does not make this an easy question because you're pushing up against that mark. In terms of why new construction, I would say that we usually look at it from a couple of different standpoints. One, the existing building's just falling apart. It's in bad shape. Then you would say, yeah, we should replace that. Neither one of these buildings are falling apart. They are fixable. If you wanted to get at a completely new style of educational design for curriculum or instruction, then you might say it, but I would also ask the question, are you okay having one or two of your buildings be drastically different than the other ones in the district from an equity standpoint? And that might be a question. And then that would also beg the question of, could we make those changes in an existing building? And I think you could. It might mean the additions are slightly larger, but you could get at some of those new construction design ideas with that addition. So from our perspective, we like to come in with a lower cost and say, you can do this for less money than what new construction would be, and it's going to make a huge difference in the schools. And then we just put together a quick schedule on that. I think that was the presentation from before. So with that, I'll stop talking really fast and answer questions. Hopefully answer questions.
Principals. Kathy's got a whole bunch of questions here.
I do. So, one thing I didn't notice, which I know you said that this was not, sorry. I know that you said this was not, like an architectural
Right.
design, but I didn't notice anywhere for a clinic on there.
We didn't put a clinic, like a community clinic in.
No, like a nurse's clinic.
Nurse's room. We do have the nurse accommodated in the design of the program. It's with the administration area, most of those. So we do have additional space for the nurse and cots in each of the designs.
Okay, and then, like, when you're talking about the SPED, the inclusion
Yep.
services and things like that, so we have, like, right now, we utilize an entire classroom for that, but that's because there are 4 adults going with groups at the same time.
Right.
So one small space is not gonna be enough to accommodate that.
Correct, and, but we're putting in multiple smaller spaces to be able to accommodate that, as opposed to having everybody in one 900 square foot room.
And then if we're adding art, we're gonna need a space for that.
We do not have art, because art is not one of your current programs, so we did not lay that out in anything. If that's a space you would add, then we would have to, it would be another, again, 900 to 1,500 square foot room, depending on how large you would want that to be.
Is that cost updating the fire alarm system?
Jacob? I believe
It's in
that's
our
included
facility
in it,
analysis
yes.
report. Might have to dig it up. This is for Hickerson, right?
Nuts and bolts, 30,000.
There should be a summary at the end of all of these that showed, yeah, total mechanical was 750. I think it's in the.
I believe it is included.
And then I wondered if sprinklers would be included over the entire building or just the new build?
In our $3 million figure, roughly $3 million for each one, we have full fire alarm system or fire alarm extension, because you've got fire alarm systems in the building, and full sprinkler costs included in that.
So it's, because I know that we have some issues with our fire alarm system now, like, we can't detect what alarm is going off and things like that easily, so I wasn't sure if that would be updated or
It
not.
would,
It
as you
would
would
be.
go through, yeah, everything would get updated with,
The state fire marshal will make this update.
And that's what I assumed, but I didn't want to assume anything.
There is a caveat on that. The existing system would be allowed to expand and would not have to be digital addressable. If you were doing a full replacement of the fire alarm system, you would have to upgrade to a digital addressable system with voice evacuation, which would allow you to detect where that initiating device is. That's something that I just worked through with the State Fire Marshal's office down in Giles, so I do have a one-to-one comparison that I could put next to that.
So, something I did notice on there, on the Hickerson diagram, it had a 235 capacity, and we are currently at that capacity.
that's your existing building that we were showing.
Yes. And then, ESL, was there a space for ESL services?
I believe there was, yes, we were accommodating ESL in there.
Is there any, like, I know that there's some storage closets and things like that, but are there plans to put storage closets in the classrooms?
No, we did not plan on doing that. If we did, it would make each classroom smaller by the size of the storage closet. You could certainly do that, but oftentimes we like to have conversations around storage and say, what are you storing and what's the best way to do it? And does cold storage make more sense than building storage new if you're doing additions, for example, just because of the cost per square foot? So we don't have converting existing classrooms and adding closets into them. We certainly could put a budget number together for that if that's what we wanted to do.
And then.
I think you're better off with doing casework or cabinetry or something like that than building closets. We're not-
And then is, like in our building, is the boiler room being addressed at all?
Yes, we did have that in there, that it was part of the, I'm trying to remember exactly, whoops, how we had diagrammed it out, but we did say.
It's the one underneath.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the one underneath. When you say, is it being addressed, what specifically are you wanting to do with it?
Like, it needs to be encapsulated
And
or,
board it
or
up.
something,
No.
because smells tend to come up
Okay.
from that, especially when it's wet.
It's not being used now, right?
It's not.
Did did all the furniture come out?
It's not out.
And I think that's all.
We don't specifically have cost to fully decommission that because our understanding is that it's not in use and you don't want to use it. We could certainly remove the door, break it up, we could demo back the mechanical system. The floor drain is probably what you're really smelling if it backs up. Those are things that we could cap off and get rid of. Being that it is a low point and it is underground without filling it in, I would not recommend getting rid of the floor drain because it is the one thing that keeps it from being a swimming pool.
So if there's things like that that are a little additional scope that we didn't have included in here, we can certainly make sure that we get that number included. But
I think on Hickerson, one of the questions the board had last time, if I recall correctly, is what Dr. Crabtree brought up was the capacity. And that the design is kind of for the current capacity and how are we, and I think there was some thought that there's possibly some development going on in the area that could increase that capacity. I mean, we don't have any projections or anything that I know of, but that was something that came up, I believe, at the board meeting, so.
again, without knowing what your enrollment projections are, it would be hard for us to say this building is the right size. Our capacity for this goes up to a full 3-section plus, so it would be the same size as your other buildings if the addition was put on and it went up that size, which would more than address your current capacity issues as well as prep you for the coming future. If it's larger than that, if you need to look at a 4-section or a 5-section building, which is very different than your elementary schools, you could do it on this site. You have plenty of room to build out here. You could put a building out there, we could figure out how the play fields and playground areas work. It actually gives you a lot more room in terms of developing a really good parking lot for it, but not knowing how big you want to make that right now based on enrollment projections is the biggest question. A 3-section building is going to get you really far into the future with all things growing at the rate you're growing now, or looking at things. If you've got a major development coming here that's going to swamp this, no pun intended, swamp this area or put this area in jeopardy, you would really have to consider, first, you want to go to a 5-section building when you don't have any 5-section elementaries, or you're going to look at boundary issues, and B, what is that and when's the right time to do it, so you're not overbuilding in anticipation of that coming projection.
Okay, my thought is that an elementary school just needs to be so big to begin with, so we need to just go at that point. If you get past that, it's not effective. So, 350, I think, would be the maximum of what an elementary school should be, K through 5. And what is the capacity for it at this point with the renovation?
Can take a look at your other buildings that are, read my own chart and remember how I put this together. Your 3-section model is at 390 as you take a look at it. And so that would be the
So
size.
Hickerson's a 3-section model?
If we put that addition on and build it to 3-section, then it would be. Currently, today, it is not.
Right.
And that's what you're looking to do. But we can add additions to it to get it to a 3-section model without any issue on the existing site.
Okay.
I think I know what you was talking
Uh,
about. Yeah, just so I'm on the same page.
Right.
Once you start getting to 350, we don't need to look at more additions.
Right,
Look
need
at
another
another school
school,
and another
right,
district.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I see no doubt that it's gonna go over 300 in the future pretty quickly out there, if we attract all the kids that are eligible to go to here, I'll put it that way.
So I think one of the things you'd have to look at then with this size building is, do you put an addition on this, get it up to that 3-section, and still know that you've got more kids coming, again, depending on what the enrollment projections say, because then you might say, if we're gonna have to build another new school anyways, we might be better off building a new school somewhere else in the district, not doing the addition on this building, do renovations to keep it a 2-section building, so now you'd have a 3 and a 2-section to accommodate your need, much more than putting an addition on here, bringing this up to 3, and still being faced with a pending need potentially of a new elementary school.
Just to clarify also, Hickerson right now is not at a true two-section model. Fourth and fifth are on a 3-classroom rotation, and you only have the 1 pre-K space. So it's actually less than a full two-section building right now.
And you've got
We have
that,
2 pre-Ks.
Right.
Sorry.
and you've got that nasty boiler room that's gonna be there.
Yes.
Even if you put that on.
Yeah, we have to-
And you're gonna have that issue.
Yep.
I think that's a good way to look at it. I'm really following you on the max per school before we start looking at more schools in different places throughout the county. Of course, the other end of the building here is, who knows what they're gonna do that'll affect our growth.
Just
I
FYI.
had to bring that out.
Right now, I think North Coffee is at a 3-section school. Hillsborough might have 4-section, I'm pretty sure. East Coffee is mainly a 2-section. Hickerson is basically 2 with a 4th, 5th going down to a 1 in some parts there. Deerfield, I think, is mainly a 2-section, maybe some 3. So most of our schools, other than Hillsborough, is a 3-section or less at this point. And so if you did go up to 3 sections at Hickerson, that would be putting them basically where the rest of the schools are. And also East Coffee would be needed, in my opinion, a 3-section school as well. I'd hate for us, and Jennifer said something, I'd hate for us to put this much money in the county commission, putting this much money into schools and not put any classrooms, and then next year get some increases and you don't have enough space.
You have to buy a
We don't want to get into that. That is not a good model. So in my opinion, I think 3 sections is
Buy
a
Jones back.
good setup in a pretty good size school in the setup for a size of the school.
I think something we need to look at is that, for instance, North Coffee is at capacity, just about, would you say? What is their enrollment?
I'd have to look up their enrollment, but are they at capacity? No.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about numbers of kids, the number of kids
North
at
Coffee.
the school.
North Coffee
They're at
still has
300
space
something.
to grow.
What is their enrollment?
This is currently your, how many of each grade you have in each
The
grade
total,
level.
okay, it's
So at North
338
County, you have
is,
322.
338 is their
338.
enrollment. So that's getting close to that 350. So what I'm
And they're at-
saying
they're at
is,
344
North
right
Coffee
now.
is
So
the
they've
point
gone
where
up
you don't
since
add on
this
to
was
that
done.
anymore. If you know,
Right.
I mean, we've got to look at the whole picture. Do we need a new school somewhere that's going to help us in the future if North Coffee gets overpopulated to go to? Hickerson, all the populations at Hickerson now would be part of that school. We've just got to look at it for the future, because no matter what happens with, no matter what happens, we're gonna grow, whether it's 5-acre tracts or 8/10 of an acre
Right.
tract. And, we can't stop it.
Right now, North Coffee has room to grow. There's rooms there for them to grow into. Hillsborough has rooms to grow into. New Union has several rooms to grow into. Deerfield has rooms to grow into. The Hickerson has the least to grow into, and that's the reason why we're talking about Hickerson.
Okay, I'm looking at Hillsborough. They've got 407 students. Do we want to have any
Okay.
more kids
I-
to
I
grow
just-
into?
What I'm saying is there are rooms there for them to take kids
If they got
we
that
had
much,
to.
yeah.
I'm not saying we want to, I'm saying there's rooms there to put kids if we need to. All the schools have rooms open to be able to put kids into. You might not want to make them that big, I'm just saying there's
And
rooms
that's my
open.
point. I'm not looking at, we can fill I'm sure every school can fill up every room with some type of educational program. I don't think anybody's got
That's
a
not what I'm
room
saying
sitting
either.
empty.
I'm saying we have rooms that we can put classrooms with kids in them. There's open classrooms to put kids.
Okay,
I
so we
understand
have
you might want to stop at 350. I'm good at that. I'm just saying there are open rooms in every one of our schools except for really Hickerson,
We
and
don't
East
have any.
has a few, but not many. It wouldn't take much to get them to that point.
So
those
we
are the
have
reasons-
schools that have classrooms that aren't being used.
I didn't say they're not being used. I said we have.
Okay, that's my point.
Okay. A classroom can be used with a counselor by themselves in it. It can have a room with PTO stuff in it that's being used, but it's not a classroom with kids in it. If we had to pull that stuff out and make it into a classroom, yes, it's there to be used as a classroom. So that's what I'm saying. They
So
all,
you're saying there's rooms that's not being used,
Non-essential.
non-essential?
they're not being
here's a good
used
way to
as
look at
a classroom for kids as a grade level class.
But my thinking is that a psychologist or a counselor needs a room, so, anyway, I'm not.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm gonna use a psychologist. A psychologist doesn't need a full classroom for what they do. They need about the size of an office. If you talk about speech teacher, usually they need about half of a classroom. They don't need a full classroom. But we have speech teachers using a full classroom just because it's there and it's available.
And where is that?
Our school,
East Coffee, I know,
Okay.
is
Our
one.
splits with
So we're
storage.
adding
It's a
on
quarter of
y'all.
it is storage.
Yeah, quarter we had to use for storage.
Okay, here's a visual example. We,
Okay, so
we look at
quarter of
anything
the
that's
room
the
we
size
have
of a
in for
classroom
storage.
that's not being used efficiently for the people that are in it. Schools, we use every room because schools need to use every room, and it's squatters' rights. They're gonna say, oh, there's an open space there, let's put some counselors in there. Could we find a more efficient room than a 900 square foot classroom for these counselors? Absolutely, and then you'd be able to use it for a classroom. So these open circles are rooms that we say, those are classroom-sized rooms that have potential. Push came to shove, you needed to put more kids in the building, that's where you're gonna do it, and you're gonna figure out how to do this differently. You might
Okay, so-
lose your conference meeting space for a year. if you need
Okay,
more.
so we have 3 at East Coffee that aren't being used.
Yes.
And
Well,
we're
we
adding
have
on.
four.
Changed
Or
since.
you have speech room then.
We got 4.
Yeah, you might,
we're adding
you might
on.
have something different
Yeah,
than what
we've
met
had,
on
we've
this, so-
added a classroom since we last met, so.
That's the
yeah.
other thing, they keep changing it on
But-
us.
I know.
But even at,
Dynamic.
at New Union and North Coffee, they have a community room that the plan was whenever they redid and did the additions, the community room used to be the library. They made a new library. Well, instead of going ahead and cutting the room in two and making 2 classrooms, which is perfect size, they didn't need the extra classrooms yet. So they left it as one big room, and they're using it as a community room where they could do book fairs, or they could do whole grade level coming in and meeting together. And it works really good, but it was actually set up so that it was gonna be 2 classrooms, but they just didn't need it yet. But in the future, if it was needed, throw a wall up, you got your 2 classrooms.
Okay, well, I'm thinking this, maybe we need to concentrate on the school that is at capacity and has no room and put all our resources there. I mean, that's just a thought.
And that's up to the board. The thing that you're gonna run into also is look at the land area that you have at the different places. And one of the things that Hickerson does run into is they're landlocked, which kind of runs into with the base, where it's at, compared to where the lake's at, and where North Coffee comes in, and also Manchester City. There's some problems there with that part of it. Whereas East Coffee might run into you're a little bit more open. You have more chances of more houses being built. I'm not saying that they're not gonna be at Hickerson. It's things that you gotta look at. The only 2 schools that would be struggling to grow very much is both Hickerson and East Coffee. So the goal was to take care of both of them, so that all of our schools are set and ready. When this mega growth hits, they're all gonna be able to grow, and they're not gonna be strangled on size.
You got
And
time,
currently,
you got
we're-
time to grow with them before, and actually plan if you need more schools.
Right,
and more
yes.
place. You
And
got a
we're
little cushion.
equivalent in numbers, so we both have the same amount. We are 5 more. We take pride right now in being 5 more than them, because we keep competing on our sheet there. But we are at the same number of students.
Where is the, and this may be a moot question, but where is the cutoff in the zoning between Hickerson and North Coffee?
Well, you got a whole line there. I've got the document, or the map to show you.
Some from across the lake toward Tullahoma go to North Coffee. correct?
Most of the ones across
Most
the
of-
lake go to North
What we
Coffee.
used to call the old Jones Elementary area.
Some of the Joneses came to Hickerson, and several went to North Coffee. I think Fire Lake is North Coffee.
I'm gonna
and
say it
prob-
again, bite back.
So, I can't tell you the line without just showing it to you, of course, on
Yeah.
the map.
Just general area, you answered it.
Yes.
Questions from,
Yeah, so, you know, I look at I like the breakdown, you got the base project and then optional expanded scope. Of course, you know, if I'm wishing, I want it all. So, when I look at, maintenance, you know, that's a hefty line. And so, but you know, being in the building, there are some things in order to, bring everything up to par.
Yep.
Those are, so, and then I see the maintenance kind of breakdowns here. When we're looking at mechanical systems and restrooms, what does that all entail, with that?
For the restrooms, it pretty much is going in and gutting them and rebuilding them.
Okay.
In those areas. There's some accessibility issues to address, as well as just the level of the plumbing in there and needing repair, and then aesthetics on top of that, where you've got, you know, you've done different repairs and chipped away at tile before, and you filled in with whatever's available, and so you can see the scars of past renovations to it. But for restrooms, those are pretty much, it's just easiest and makes the most sense to go in, start from scratch in those areas, because you'll actually get a little bit better capacity out of them.
Yeah.
Our plumbing needs it.
Yes. Yes.
It's clogged a lot.
Yes.
Our kindergartners like the toilet paper.
If I'm not mistaken, we also had a line item cost, a recommendation from our mechanical folks to actually go in and scope that line and see if there was some damage to the underground line somewhere that has not been identified. So there isn't a full cost to replace that, but there is some cost in that, to actually see if we can't troubleshoot and identify what keeps causing that problem in your problematic bathroom.
Okay.
And that would be above and beyond the restrooms themselves, because now you're down into the infrastructure of it.
these copies on septic,
Yeah.
Yep,
They both are.
both are.
and I know there's some issues with that.
Depends on the weather.
As always.
As it does with septic. Other questions for Wold?
I was just gonna make the point that we have grown since we came out, so, yes, our speech still takes a whole classroom up. Our counselor does, but she teaches classes still. But we gained a CDC class who definitely needs the space, and then the art, potential of an art.
Right.
And so, if any room on our list that I see is kind of a room that's open, it's not circled on there, it's that STEAM lab, because that's kind of our multi-purpose room right now. Our coaches are housed in there when they're there, our OT, PT's housed when they're in there, but every other room is used daily.
Right. And we did include the STEAM room as part of sort of the assumptions for going forward. We did not put art in there because when we talked, we said we don't have a plan to add art to the curriculum. So if that's new, then that's new.
And that's something, you know, in the development process, I think that actually could convert to that, to an art space. right?
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, so.
STEAM room, art room, that's an easy conversion.
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, the cost of East Coffee renovation is $18,020,000.
Yeah, and that would be, that's for,
That's Hickerson.
shouldn't have put so many animations in. here.
Okay,
Takes a long
this is
time to flip
Hickerson,
through.
$18,020,000. What, I couldn't find East Coffee.
Next to
It's
it.
right beside it.
Same page.
17.8, it's close.
Oh, okay, they're both the same. All right, sorry. I thought it was just-
And this is looking at doing sort of what we would call the base project, which, just in looking at these buildings, even if you don't increase the capacity, you've already identified your gym and your music areas are really, really small, and you've done this addition on other buildings. You know that you've got administrative expansion that has to happen, as well as some site development issues in terms of your parking and traffic. So this is where you started us on the road. Then we looked at, okay, what do the additions look like to that building? What's the capacity look like? How do you get to some of those levels? So I think just, even if you did nothing with capacity, you want to be focused at the top of this line and say, let's say these remain two-section buildings. Do you still address the cafeteria, gym, music size issues?
I don't think any of us want it to remain that small, though.
Then you'd be down
Yeah, I think
somewhere
we
across
all
here.
agree pretty much that we need it to have more space.
But even at the 18 million, that doesn't include extra classrooms to go to a 3-section space, right?
No, this is looking at where you're at today, getting you up to that full two-section and saying, if you're at two-section, this is where it is. To do an
Right.
addition, now that number's going up. So now you are pushing against 60%. But the question we still have is, without having a really thorough enrollment projection, knowing what you've got coming in terms of potential development in those areas, are you better off saying, maybe we should be looking at a new school right now and addressing this and just getting it to 2-section versus putting an addition on to get to 3-section, if you're gonna have to do that anyways?
Or
I liked your recommendation
Put lipstick
of
on a
everyone coming out.
if you had the benefit of having a set number that we want to shoot for, like Ms. Jones discussed, a set number that when our schools start getting to 325, 350 students, we cap it.
Right.
That gives you an idea of where we need to be in our building to get a harder number and a little bit better number possible.
Well, and I think just to maybe bring up something historical that I learned whenever we were doing this, is that that's already happened at Hickerson, where a school got closed down and they more or less doubled the size of that existing building.
Right.
So that's how you went from the original building to what you've got now.
We just, if what I just said takes place, we can't ever do that again.
Yeah, but
It's
what-
only additional schools rather than removed schools.
And what happened in that close down of Jones, a lot of those kids went into Tullahoma, they didn't come to Hickerson, so there's still a pool of kids that qualify for Coffee County schools that aren't coming to our schools, and a lot of it is because of the building. And not because the school's not excellent. I think it's a great school. But a lot of times, that's what people look at is the exterior, and they assume that it's not a good school, it's a new school sitting over here it is, and that's sad, but it's true.
Potentially, those kids could come back to Coffee County and go to
Right. I
Hickerson.
mean, especially, particularly people that move into the area, and I know this from experience. I can tell them all day, that is an excellent school, I can show them what they're doing. They pull up and they see an old building, walk in with low ceilings and boiler rooms and, things built onto it. They go somewhere else, and it's bad.
They do. You can talk to your ECD people, Economic Community Development, and they'll tell you the first question they have is quality of education. Well, they typically base that on just the physical appearance of the
Right.
building first.
I know.
But let me tell you a quick story. Years ago, I was just right out of school, and I went to a county commission meeting in Franklin, Tennessee, Williamson County. And they're talking about getting new industries to move to the county. And they had a cranky old county commissioner named Clyde Lynch, potato farmer is the way he described himself. And he said, well, why do we want to do that? Why do we want, he referred to Williamson County as the dimple of the universe. He said, why do we want to do that? Why don't we just have an excellent school system and we'll get all those rich people from Nashville to move here? And that's exactly what happened. That's 40-something years ago, was the county commission gave them carte blanche and said, here, make this the best system you can. And that's the key component of Williamson County's growth.
Okay, so y'all are, then you're pushing renovation, is that correct?
We're trying to provide enough factual
mean,
information to show you where you can go, because I think ultimately you're gonna have to make a recommendation, and that's gonna have to go to another body, and that body is gonna wanna make sure that you've got all your ducks in a row that
I mean,
says,
seems
we've got the
consensus
support to do that.
That's what y'all are pushing, is renovation.
Unless you have enrollment projections that show that growth is coming fast and soon, we think you can accommodate these buildings because we think these buildings are fixable. We think that they're strong, and with the right additions, it's gonna bring them up to similar capacity and quality as the other buildings in your district. So, yeah, we don't see a reason to say you should build new. And I know that's weird to hear an architect say, yeah, you don't need a new building, but we don't. We think the best use of schools is always, can you get more life out of it, and does that make sense? It does help. I just realized, remember when I'm doing this, so this slide is the top of your budget there. So that top base project scope, that aligns with the top for that. When we go to this slide, that's the optional projects. And when we go to this slide with the blue, we don't have the blue price, because that's what brings you up to 3-section, which we don't see based on your current enrollment needed, but we could price that for you if you want to go to 3-section. So your budget slides in there are the first one, and then the second one is the bottom half of it, just for reference.
And just to notice, that means that East Media Center Library would not expand, or, because on the basic price or your minimum, it stays the same. So currently it is just, it works, we're gonna make anything work that y'all give us. It's just small, I mean, it is small. She's still holding her tongue, she said we're never gonna get her a new library, maybe not until she retires, I don't know, but that basic price doesn't include that common space, and every student goes through that twice a week.
But if we wanted to adjust that,
That's
if we
right.
want to do that and say, can we do part of that right now, we would take a look at, yeah, in order to expand that, what are these spaces, how we do that, we would have to put a little bit more here. There's a way for us to say, do you just want to put that on there? But you're right, that one did not have adjusting the media center right now and said, again, trying to keep that cost as low as possible and say, if you're only going to do sort of the base level to even buy more time and go, let's wait a year or two before we see what growth projections we have, that would be a way of doing it.
And one of the things that Vaughn said, and I completely agrees, is the equitable between the schools. We have two schools that they have the small gym, they have the small cafeteria, they have the small library. The other ones we have taken care of. They've got a nice gym that's state-of-the-art. They have a nice library, state-of-the-art. They have a nice cafeteria, state-of-the-art. These kids deserve as much as those other schools do. And I think we definitely need to keep at least equitable with those, especially those core areas.
I don't think anybody on the school board is denying that.
I know, I'm just saying, one of the things he had said, we gotta make sure we keep it equitable. No, I don't think y'all are saying no.
Something is gonna have to happen. We've gotta do
Right.
something at both, period.
Well, my concern is Hickerson.
Exactly. But I also have I've got a long-term feel here. And I mean, I feel like we should discuss as a board where we would like our school populations to be at. We don't want them overpopulated. We don't want too many people in one school, if at all possible. That's a great idea to keep the numbers down as much as possible in schools. Because Coffee County, even with the largest amount of growth, one elementary, if we ever did get into a bind, if we set our numbers at 325 to 350, and we want to make sure our schools are sized and tooled to accommodate that. And we did that, and then we got to it. It's kind of more of a long-term plan, and then we got to it to where those were filling up. It'll only take one school to really just drop with redistricting or students and rezoning them. It would just take one school to really drop that again and get you many, many, many more years before you have to build another school.
And what I meant, my concern with Hickerson, I don't mean that we don't need both. My concern with the building. Now, East Coffee, I think renovating it would be a no-brainer, because you certainly wouldn't want to put any school there. That school's in good shape. Hickerson would be, to me, I'm just one person on this board, but to me, that's where we've got to really look at it closely, because, you're adding on, but you're not really doing anything to the present building, are you? I mean.
No, we'd be changing considerable amounts of that building to,
But you're not gonna be able to do anything with the boiler room except encapsulate it.
No, the
And keep
18
the drain.
18 million.
But it's the same, see, we're spending the same amount on Hickerson just about as we are East. And East Coffee's building is in a lot better condition. You're not having to do a whole lot to the present building, are you?
no, I think.
So
in
basically,
terms-
that money is
Yeah,
going to
it's
the.
about the same in
So-
terms of the quantity of
So
renovation.
you're having
that
to
we're
do more to East Coffee?
It's pretty similar between the two.
We have a boiler room too.
Yeah.
Also in various states of use.
Yes.
No, so-
Right.
Yes.
We didn't see a huge difference between what we have to do at each building. It's not like it's, East Coffee's got this much, but Hickerson's got this much to it. We're really gonna be in trouble here. So it's very similar in terms of approach.
And y'all gotta understand where I'm coming from. I was here when we built onto Jones. We spent all that taxpayer money onto Jones School, and then we don't even have it now. I don't want that, that's not gonna happen in Hickerson because it's part of our, but I can't stand to go to that school and think of all that money we put on that old building. And that old building is about the same age as Hickerson, Like, I don't know. That's just my thinking, and I'm gonna be quiet.
Buy it back,
Everybody
remodel
else is
it.
talking.
Going back to once again, the three sections, and like I said, North Coffee has three sections. And right now, they're at the 344, that's including the pre-K. So 350, but it is set up still that they could add more kids if they needed to. So if you're looking at the 350, three sections is what you're gonna be needing to make that work either way. And that's the size I'm hearing Ms. Jones actually say more, and I've heard Robert say once or twice, but.
I would like to see prices for the 3 sections.
That's easy. We can do that.
I'm leaning more towards go big or go home type of things. I don't
I'll
want you
just,
to
I'll
come
just
back
go
a
ahead
year
and throw
later.
this out here for y'all three, but I'm gonna say it's gonna be around 22 million.
For Hickerson?
Probably, yeah.
To get to 3 section?
That'd be for
To go
the,
to three- No, I'm gonna say that on East Coffee. Hickerson, I'm gonna say it's probably gonna be an extra 3 million. And then, by then, you're only 10 to 15 million.
Under a
in
new
prices to
school.
Work for you, but you're only 10, 15 million from a new school.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong?
That's a
not-
scary face.
I'm not sure that is right, but we could sharpen a pencil and let you know. I mean, we did.
No, what I'm saying is, when you're at 25 million, I'm talking 35 to 45 million dollars for a new school.
Yes, if you're looking at that upper end, it's a bigger gap. If you're looking at the lower end, it's a smaller gap, right? But
Well, by the time you take Hickerson to a three-section school, you're going to be probably close to 25 million dollars.
Yeah, I bet this addition, I would say, is probably gonna be 3.5 to 4 million
Yeah.
by itself.
So you're
Plus
gonna be-
doing renovations for SPED, plus
Yeah.
doing
Yeah,
renovations for.
You're gonna be getting
probably
about
in the-
$25 million.
Yep, you're right.
Well, then you add another 10 to 15 million dollars on it, and you're tearing up buying a new school.
Yep. That's why I said you're gonna push that 60% number
Right.
up real quick.
So that's where we are, ultimately.
And y'all, like.
And that's
like-
not a funny number between the two.
Well, like Jacob said, ultimately, well, what this group comes up with, and what it's trying to come up with tonight, is what needs to be figured out that's gonna be going down the road, or the building here, to get funding for. And I do wanna go back and just make sure everybody understands. And I know this has been 5 years ago. New Union was the additions that we put on, which was all the things you saw, was $5 million. For North Coffee, it was $5 million. So County Commission, about 6, 7 years ago, gave Coffee County Schools, just for those two schools, a total of $10 million to do those two schools with classrooms and everything. So all I'm saying is, we're gonna have to go and ask somebody else to give the money. And whatever we take to them, that's gonna make a difference. Yeah, y'all know that, I'm just
Well,
stating the point. that's all.
they're pretty smart when they look at 25 million versus 40 million, new versus repair, that may not get us all the way where we need to be. They're also smart enough to understand that's
And that's one building.
a little bit better deal. I know, I'm
Yeah,
talking
I
about the
know,
one
just-
building.
I know, just one
A
building.
concern you'd have too, I think, if you were to build a new school somewhere, then the dirty word comes in. You gotta rezone.
Yep.
I was actually just gonna say to Ms. Jones and Mr. Gilly's point that if you do go about getting a third-party enrollment and projection study, you could absolutely include looking at redistricting in order to identify where a new school would go, should you choose the third option, which is leave those two in place, add another school to your system in order to deal with capacity. So there's another option out there, and if you are gonna be pursuing that, that is absolutely something that you would wanna make sure that you're a group that's doing your enrollment projections, or you're studying for redistricting, or rezoning would include that as part of their scope.
And if that's something that the board would like, I can get with these guys to get some names and bring you some prices for, the study, if that's the direction the board would like to pursue.
I think that's excellent. I don't know.
But
I think
even
that'd be
if-
a great idea to have a study done and know.
I think you're gonna have to have some numbers before you
Yeah.
can even start to
'Cause it
say
may-
what do we need.
It may come down to just, hey, at the Hickerson School, let's fix the vital things that are dangerous or whatever, and do the best we can, because we're ultimately gonna end up looking at another school right over here next door, spend you $30 and $40 million there instead of between two schools.
That's
the other
not
thing-
fair, though. That's not fair to East Coffee and to Hickerson when they're shabby and these other schools are nice. They
No, I'm not
deserve-
saying about leaving them
yeah.
shabby. I'm saying you do your vitals you need to do, and you fix them
They-
up, and
they
we look
need
at a
some
gym. Of
Band-Aids
course,
for
building
sure.
just a gym's a lot cheaper than building the whole big package if you don't need it for the room. I mean, yes, you gotta address,
Yeah.
address.
I would hate to say, well, we're gonna be building a new school,
No,
so don't
no,
worry
I
about
don't think
these two.
nobody's in here.
Okay,
Well, I
just
mean,
making
is there not
sure.
space
Yeah,
on
no,
Scared me
no.
for a
Or
second.
anyone? Is there not space on that property out there for a new school?
At
For
Hickerson,
Hickerson.
Uh-huh,
there is, only if you're gonna tear down the existing Hickerson after you build it.
well, yeah.
But one
I
thing
mean,
about,
if you're gonna build a new school, that needs to go.
well, one thing to remember about Hickerson is, you know, and this has come into the projected growth, is how much is Tullahoma gonna expand out toward it? Because Tullahoma, that's the only way Tullahoma can grow now, because they're locked in by county lines, is back toward Hickerson, so you'll start losing, you know, if there's several subdivisions being built, you can bet Tullahoma's gonna reach out and grab it. Because they're gonna want that money.
Am I correct when I think that if you go to Hickerson, you can usually go to Tullahoma schools as well? Because I know a lot of the fifth graders, some of them went to Tullahoma.
They
They
need
gotta
a
pay.
tuition.
They do, okay, I didn't know.
And that's
that
my
one.
You can't,
point.
the city or the
I think
county
a lot
or
of them
anybody
trust the
can't
building.
enter.
I
the
think so
ci-
too.
Manchester City or
cannot.
Tullahoma cannot annex you or annex land without the owner agreeing to it.
Right, I realize that, but what I'm saying though is, you know,
Yeah.
you have a big
Could it happen?
development
Yes.
come in, you know, they can start looking at.
Request that, yeah.
Yeah. you
And I know
and
they're
mean-
doing that. We farm next to Rose Hill, and they have a note right now because TGC, I'm talking in this one, TGC has bought the land next to the Rose Hill, and they're trying, there's a note to go out to go have that approved for it to become city.
Yeah.
And it's only because we farm that they're trying to get that city. So 55 is they're trying to start getting commercial businesses. CFC's really trying for it to be commercial.
It's actually in the UGBs that are everywhere, even if
The-
it's school.
We just talked about this a minute ago on an industrial board. We had an industrial board meeting. The problem with Tullahoma, of course, is a railroad track.
Yes.
Can't expand so much. And so you're gonna have to go out and toward Hickerson.
Yes.
That's the problem that you're gonna have, because that railroad track dictates a whole lot of stuff, and you don't really realize it until you really start looking at it from a growth perspective, that you gotta go, you can't, you know, that railroad track just
And it's
dictates a whole lot
considered
of stuff.
city. I learned that yesterday.
Yeah.
They can annex, but they cannot take the school.
Yes, ma'am.
They can't take the school.
Right.
And
No.
if those kids are already going to Hickerson School and it's a good school, they're not gonna take them into Tullahoma. I mean, you know, a few of them may not, but most of them aren't.
And
And
a
we
lot of
can't-
times what happens with that, and I agree with what you're saying completely, but over time, it starts bleeding back the other direction. It stays that way until that group of kids is out of that school, and
Okay,
then it
so-
starts switching back. But I agree with what you're saying.
Well, and what I'm saying is, I'm not for this renovation if it's not gonna make them have, what are you calling it? I call it enrollment, and if it's not.
He's been calling it sections,
All right,
so
there's
it's
three
a number of
section school. I
class,
thought
number
that's what
per
it
grade
was.
level.
That's not, I mean, they need a three-section the same as anybody else.
So, and I know it sounded like I was being facetious when I said only if you're gonna tear down Hickerson. My concern is if you have that much growth coming that you need a new school, if you simply replace this one and build a new school there, all you're doing is adding a net of one section, one classroom per grade, and you're losing the capacity of this. You may be in a position where you say, it makes sense for us to do the gym additions, to get these things right, keep these at 2 sections, build a new elementary someplace if we need to, and then over time, we bring these both up to 3 section to handle your capacity. We just don't know what that is unless we have an enrollment projection that shows us how fast you're gonna grow.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate. I'm sitting on the county commission, and I've sat through county commission meetings when school boards are presenting budget requests, and one of the first things they ask is, are we growing? And how much are we growing? So the more information we can give them, you know, the more likely they'll go, okay, that makes perfect sense. Because I've worked with a lot of counties across the state, and the county commissions don't get along with school boards most of the time. They're getting a little more receptive of late because of the growth, But I think the study would be a great benefit as far as, it's another tool to present to the county commission.
What does a study like that cost typically? I mean, range-wise, ballpark?
I'll take a look. I don't want to misquote.
Okay.
Since we don't.
I just want to say, they could have done a study on Rutherford County and never realized what was happening to them. And that's, to me, it's just a no-brainer. We're not going to stay stagnant here, whether, even though we want to.
Oh, you're in
May
Middle
want to
Tennessee.
stay.
You're in
I
Middle
know.
Tennessee, and we have people moving that, from California, that have a 2-hour drive one way to work every day. So property all over the Middle Tennessee area is being bought up by people that don't mind staying in the car 4 or 5 hours every day.
I know.
And we have the interstate system that gets them there quickly.
Well, I can also do a little bit of the devil's advocate on this one, because I was just looking at an article this morning that Williamson County paused some additions in new schools because their projections that they had did not meet what the actual growth was. So it's kind of a moving target everywhere. And without at least having somebody who's looking at all of the facets of it, you're really just kind of going by your gut.
Right.
Yeah, about the only thing you can do is say, we don't want no more than 350 kids in our schools.
Right.
That's the only thing you can do.
right.
Yeah,
But,
that would be the criteria we would
right,
use.
but getting the numbers and getting a study, that's the only thing we can do here. I think.
At this point, you know, we gotta know numbers before we move forward, no matter what we do.
Did
The
we
county
ask
commission
Mr.
will ask that
Go ahead,
question.
Scott. Did you, Scott? Yes.
Well, no, we were just talking about, again, we've got 2 of the biggest industrial parks in the state of Tennessee here. I mean, it's coming, you know. We got one in Memphis, and we just got through selling one to the state. It's 1,845 acres out here on 55. So the growth's coming, and we're gonna have to look at it like we know that it's gonna come. And I think Freda's got a good, very good point of, you know, we're gonna grow, but, I mean, we're still gonna have to have Hickerson because, you know, we got an industrial park out next to Hickerson. You know, and Joint Industrial Park is over there.
Well, we already bus some children, like, they're
Mhm.
over there by Normandy.
Yep.
And that's, they're on the bus for a long time
Mhm.
already. You wouldn't want them going farther than that, so.
I mean, I think it's part of the thing of the, that we're having with our land and subdivision thing now is, you know, we're gonna, but it's, you know, Freda's right. She's the real estate agent that, it's coming, and we're gonna have to get ready for it, and we're gonna be a part of that. So,
Should we ask Mr. Shores to go and get us some quotes or on doing a study?
I'm in agreement with it.
yeah.
Is there a chance that the county commission has already done a study? Like, are there other, I don't know a lot about that. Is there another group in this town that may have already done a study? We can just say, hey, what did that say?
Frida probably would know that more than I would.
I'd say there's a group of, people against the latest proposals at the county on the other end of the building that can tell you that.
I think we've got one, Jennifer.
I've asked.
Okay, that way we could maybe just
Yeah.
use
I just put it
that.
Yes,
this way,
ma'am.
it's probably gonna grow toward Tullahoma than out toward my way.
Yeah, no, I've asked the people down at the other end of the building, you know, those people down at the other end of the building.
I'm still
And
saying
they
Mike
don't
Jones.
have,
Before I would go and get, I mean, I could bring you, proposals to you, and you can decide what you want to do. But I will talk to Mayor Hunt and ask him if he knows of any group, any one of the committees that might would have that type of data, so that if they do, then we can use it instead of having to pay for it.
Right.
But if they don't, then you can still move forward with it the other way.
I'm pretty sure we have it at the industrial
Okay.
board.
But I do know that,
okay,
that the majority of the developments now are like you said, they're getting annexed into the city, like out on Highway, you know, out behind Bud Riddle's property. That new subdivision is part of the city, so it won't take, you know, they won't be going to North Coffee.
Okay, I'm gonna ask this group, the board, what do you want me to, or not? Scott said that he's got it. If y'all want to, we can use what he's got, or if you want me to move forward and try to find the other, I will, but since Scott's got it, I'm fine with him presenting it instead of me.
well,
Let me make sure that go ahead, Jennifer.
Because
I was
we,
just gonna say, if you have it, then I think we should try to use it.
So our firm does public sector work. We do government, we do education, we do healthcare, senior living. And I will tell you that the demography studies that counties and cities do are not trying to calculate how many kids are coming to the schools. They're looking at what kind of infrastructure they need, how they need to expand their services, that type of thing. So it will give you part of the solution. It will not tell you how many kids you have coming and how soon. It'll tell you how many houses are being built, and then you'd still have to speculate on that. So it's
Will
the
it
caution
help
there.
us sound reasonable
Right.
when we ask for a new school?
I would say more likely what would happen would be your folks that would be looking at your enrollment projections would reference that study and would use that in order to develop some more concrete versions. As an existing document, existing planning document, existing municipal work in progress or planned, they would use that as part of their projections. So it would be more like underlying data that feeds into their study and not necessarily something that you take as actionable right away.
It may even be that some demographers will study all these types of things. They might say, well, we've already studied that for the county, we'll just add on this part to it. So if the demographer they've used has that capacity to understand school enrollment as well, then they could just expand that, kind of like having a surveyor say, can you do a little bit more?
All right. I would say, let's see what the industrial board has. If we need to supplement that, then, you know, Mr. Shores would go ahead. So what do we need, Wold to do here?
Price on 3-section
So
for both schools, please.
What I would suggest, based on your discussion, is we'll work with Kelvin to find out who the demographer is, what study information they have, and then if we need more, bring recommendations on that. Price out the 3-section for additional size, and maybe even start looking at land and say, where do you have available land if you did have to build an elementary school that wasn't on the Hickerson side?
You will look at a new school for Hickerson?
And when I say this, we're not charging you money for this, just to be clear.
For a new school option at Hickerson?
Yeah, what it costs,
Yeah.
Approximately what it costs for a new one compared to doing it a 3-section.
And would that be a 3-section school, the new one?
Yes, we could price it at 3-section versus 2, that's not a problem.
I think our conceptual program that you've already put together is for a 3-section model, right?
Correct.
So basically, we'd be going back to the county and asking them to finance $60 million. Is what pretty much comes down to if you had a new school and then did the renovations at East Coffee. Is that about right?
You'd be in that ballpark
Yeah.
for sure.
So,
Well, 30, if you just did it at one school, yeah. But
right, yeah. All right. Any other questions for Wold? And we can wrap this up?
Just briefly, I know this is a work session, you already had established topics. I watched the board meeting yesterday, apologize for not being here. If there were any questions that you wanted to ask us about the lighting study, I'd be happy to answer it. We could do that after the meeting or.
We kind of tore you apart. I'm sorry. It was, for me, it was a lot of numbers, but that's because it's me. It wasn't your fault. I've
You watched
since
all
talked to
4.5
people, it
hours
makes
of the
more
meeting?
sense.
I was there in spirit.
That was a long meeting.
Well, he's got a new baby girl at home, so he's probably sitting there playing with her while he's watching.
Oh, okay, got it. All right, so, okay.
Which school district is she going to?
Any questions on the lights while we're at it? All right. Well, there's no further questions. We can wrap up this meeting, and Mr. Daywood, and we are done.
Thank